Hello and welcome back. In this video we're going to talk about OWASP ZAP authenticated scans. Before we start talking about authentication and authenticated scans, one important thing that we need to know about OWASP ZAP is the OWASP ZAP modes. There are different modes when we're performing attacks using OWASP ZAP, and they are safe mode, protected mode, standard mode, and attack mode. Safe mode is when our OWASP ZAP won't do anything which is dangerous to the application operation. So it would do all the tests that they are harmless and all the tests that they are safe, but none of the tests that could potentially harm the application. Protected mode is when OWASP ZAP would do some of those dangerous actions, some of those dangerous tests, but it actually simulates those and it's not going to perform that on a live application to damage the application operation. Standard mode is what is used most of the times and what we're using, and that is basically performing all the tests without any restriction. Attack mode is just an active type of attack which would start doing the test on newly discovered nodes or new discovered URLs all the time. So I'm moving to OWASP ZAP on Kali Linux here to show you how these different modes are working. And as you can see on the screen here, there are 4 different modes on the top left of OWASP ZAP window which you can select. So you can select safe mode, protected mode, standard mode, or attack mode. So based on the mode that you select, the policy would change and the number of attacks and the type of attacks would also change. So going back to authentication and authenticated scans, one of the challenges that we have with most of the applications is that they are requiring a username and password to log in, and they are basically performing authentication before they let you accessing any of the pages. So that is a challenge for vulnerability scanners and penetration testing devices or systems. And that is because unless it is authenticated, you don't have access to the other URLs to perform testing. So one good thing you can do with OWASP ZAP is you can automate the function of authentication on the system itself. So you can basically create some patterns and some variables and let OWASP ZAP to log in automatically to the application whenever is required and basically perform what is needed for the scan. To do that, we just go back to our Kali machine. And as you can see here, this is a new window. We don't have anything, so I'm just going to launch my browser again. And once the browser is up and running, I'm just going to go to my DVWA application, and I'm going to log in. So that's as much as I need to do here. So once I've done this, then you can see that the site has been discovered on OWASP ZAP here. And one important thing you can see here is the post, HTTP post command, and the URL is actually available. So that's the URL which is used for authentication and login. So we have the concept of context on OWASP ZAP, which we could create a context and use that context for authentication. So I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. So what we actually need to do, we need to include this URL in a new context. So that post command, HTTP post, and as you can see, this is just created a new context for me. the first thing I'm going to do is just rename it. So I call it DVWA login, right? And I go to the authentication section. Right now it is set to manual. I'm going to change that to form-based authentication. Select the URL. So this is the URL which is used for authentication. Select it. And as you can see, it automatically discovers the parameters that I need to set to log into the application. So you can see that I have login, username, and password. So I select username parameter to be username and the password parameter to be password. So once I have done that, the next step is to make sure that I actually have those username and password defined somewhere. So I go to the user section and I just add a new user here. So username is admin and our password is password, which is used on DVWA. So I click that and now I have created the user and the password, and you can see I have created the pattern for the authentication and I have created a new context. So we pretty much have all the things that we need. If you want to possibly use different users for different URLs, or you potentially want to initiate a brute force attack and things like that, you could even do that. So you could have a multiple user name and password here as well. So one other thing that is important to do before we start scanning is the logged out response message. So this is important because OWASP ZAP needs to know when it is logged in and when it is logged out. So we are going to give a pattern here and specify a pattern here to tell OWASP ZAP when the application is logged out. So I'm going to go back to my DVWA and I'm just going to view the page source code here. So what you need to get from here is just a sample. So I'm just going to get a sample. Let's say the title is a good sample that we could use, and copy that, right? And we're going back to my OWASP ZAP and paste it here. So as soon as OWASP ZAP sees that pattern within an application, it recognizes that it is the login page and it is not logged in yet. So we need to do authentication and it would perform the authentication. So I'm just going to click OK now. So we have done what we needed to do here. The next step is to flag that particular context that we created on that post URL. So we do that, and this is now ready. Click OK. So right now we have pretty much done what is needed in order to perform the authenticated scans on OWASP ZAP. The last thing we're gonna do is to make sure that we force user mode on the screen. So as you can see, that icon on the top of the window, we need to click on it, and as soon as you click on it, you see that it says forced user mode enabled. So once we've done all these things, as soon as you start attacking the application, after that it would perform authenticated scans against that application. So it would basically try to log in to the application if it is not already logged in, which is going to be found out by the pattern that we specified as logged out pattern. And if it is not logged in, it would use the username and password to log into the application, discover the URLs, and initiate the attacks. And as soon as the attacks are initiated, obviously it would be alerted here. So you see when we've done that, there is a few other SQL injection and other attacks, basically successful attacks here as well, which has been found and reported. And back to what we've been talking about in the past. So if there is a SQL injection attack detected, for example, on this application, you could literally go there and identify what is the injection attack, how it works, and try to basically simulate that or get advantage of that attack in a real world. So that's how you do the penetration testing attacks. So that's it about OWASP ZAP. In the next video, we're going to talk about Burp Suite, which is another useful tool on Kali Linux. Thank you for watching, and I'll be with you in the next one.